Guys, this just gets sadder and sadder every day. Lil Boat has seemed to join the hip-hop Avengers in the fight for the elimination of Mr. Aubrey Drake Drizzler Ovi Graham. Yes, one of Drake's former best friends, the guy who taught Drake how to paint his nails, one of the pivotal rappers in teaching Drake how to sound like he's from Atlanta, and someone who Drake has gone on record saying is one of his best friends in the industry. Despite their massive age gap, with Drake pushing 38 years old and Lil Yachty only being 25 years old, these two rappers recently have seemed to be very, very close friends, but it looks like the tables have turned and they now might be beefing. So in this video, we're gonna figure out exactly what's going on here, because first of all, what could Drake have possibly done to make so many people within the industry hate him? And second of all, for someone like Yachty, who has given Drake so much, I mean, Yachty has ghostwritten several songs for Drake over the last few years. He gave Drake the confidence to walk outside with Hello Kitty nail polish on. He executive produced Drake's comeback album, Her Loss, with 21 Savage. And he's basically been Drake's cheerleader for the last 2 years. So if any rapper in the industry is going to be beefing with Drake, Lil Yachty would be the last person you'd expect to be doing so. But that very well might be the case. So let's peel back the layers here, let's unpack all the facts. And I have a little quiz for you guys. I'm going to reveal the answer at the end of this video, but what do Lil Yachty, Lil Wayne, and Travis Scott all have in common? Stick around to the end of this video for the answer and drop a comment if you think you know the answer already.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to, guys like this, Rapaholics, because I think they directly get it.
Yeah, just to give you guys a little backstory here, Drake and Lil Yachty have become very, very close over the last few years. Drake has been spotted in more pictures and videos with Lil Yachty than his own son. Drake first brought up Lil Yachty on a 2016 track with Gucci Mane, where he rapped "Shout out Yachty, but this ain't a Lil Boat." Then they connected on Instagram. Lil Yachty made an appearance in the 21 Savage and Drake music video Sneaking back in 2017. Then he actually executive produced an entire Drake and 21 Savage album in 2022 titled Her Loss. He actually also ghost wrote 2 records for Drake off that album titled Back Outside Boys and Jumbotron Poppin'. Drake has barely done interviews this decade, but he did give Lil Yachty one of the only interviews he's done in years back in 2022, and the two also did interviews with Bobbi Althoff right around the same time as each other. Right around that time, Bobbi Althoff was asked about her interview with Lil Yachty, and she gave a pretty questionable answer. She basically said he was awkward and weird, which is ironic because her whole persona is basically acting awkward within her interviews. And for one of her first major interviews being with Lil Yachty, it kind of seemed like a slap in the face that she would then go on to talk about him in a negative light after he was one of the key people that put her on in the beginning. And as a result, both Drake and Lil Yachty pulled their interviews off of Bobbi Althoff's channel. And we don't necessarily know if anything else went on behind the scenes, but it plays an important role later on in the story that both Drake and Lil Yachty had interviews with Bobbi. Then she goes on to say some pretty bad stuff about Lil Yachty, and very, very shortly after, Drake just pulls his interview with her. He was definitely loyal to Yachty. The two did another collaboration in 2023, and Drake started dressing exactly like Yachty, which is what prompted Kendrick Lamar to reference Lil Yachty in his beef with Drake, as throughout his 6-minute assassination of Drake's character on Euphoria, where he painted a very ugly picture of the fact that Drake has no true identity of his own, he steals from the culture, he's spiraling, and then rapping that Lil Yachty can't give Drake any swag. Things started looking very, very ugly, the beef started escalating, and Yachty was obviously dragged in the middle of it. And from there, we obviously know what happened. Drake dropped Family Matters, thinking that was the red button that was going to destroy Kendrick. He came out with crazy accusations about Kendrick, but Kendrick stomped on the whole moment just 30 minutes later when he released Meet the Grams, coming out with even crazier allegations against Drake, saying that he doesn't only have a son, but he's also been hiding a daughter from the world. Then he goes on to drop Not Like Us. It becomes a #1 hit, and from there he won, right? It was obviously over. He was the unanimous winner, and with dozens of artists hating Drake and Kendrick playing Drake's game and making a #1 hit record that was also a diss record, Drake was obviously in a very tough spot, and at that moment, he needed his friends in the industry to be riding for him no matter what. He needed all the love he could get. Like, he started showing more attention to 21 Savage. He came out to his show. They did a collaboration together. Like, he needed to show that he was not a colonizer of Atlanta. He also brought Party Next Door out of the OVO sweatshop, standing next to him more in the last 2 weeks than he has in the last 3-4 years, and announcing a collaboration album with Party Next Door coming soon. But one person who was noticeably missing next to Drake during his attempted comeback from that massive loss that he took was Lil Yachty. We haven't seen the two together in months since the beef, and before the beef they were always spotted together. And there might be a reason for that. See, during the week that Kendrick dropped Not Like Us, Lil Yachty did an interview which is now deleted offline, and he was asked about the beef and he had a lot to say. Yachty said that a pivotal moment of the beef was actually Kendrick releasing Meet the Grams, because it absolutely stepped on the moment of Family Matters. He said that Meet the Grams was very, very well put together, but it wasn't credible because the daughter stuff that Kendrick was accusing Drake of was a lie. He also said that both guys are great, as in Kendrick Lamar and Drake are both great guys, and that they didn't have enough ammo on each other, so they had to find crazy allegations against each other to add validity to their diss tracks. So Kendrick went with the whole PDF angle, while Drake went with the whole women abuser thing, and both of them basically had no proof. He also said that Drake's been dealing with hate his whole career, and he's never truly been liked, which is ironic because Drake has done his best to show us that he still has friends within the industry ever since this beef happened, but Lil Yachty has been someone who hasn't been spotted with Drake. And the most interesting thing that Yachty said in this whole interview is that the beef actually ended with Not Like Us, and that it's a banger, and there's pivotal moments of every beef, and the pivotal main moment of this one was the record Not Like Us. It's funny that he says that because Drake actually responded to Not Like Us with his record The Heart Part 6, which was basically a desperate attempt at defending all the allegations that Kendrick threw at him. Lil Yachty in this interview is completely ignoring that record and saying that the beef ended with Not Like Us, not that it ended with The Heart Part 6. And just like the Bobbi Althoff interview, this interview was mysteriously taken down. Lil Yachty, who was known to constantly defend Drake, didn't really seem to have anything positive to say about Drake's performance within this beef or even try to make any attempt at defending him. And when a Drake fan account on Twitter reposted clips of this interview basically saying that Lil Yachty wasn't doing enough to defend Drake after all the defending that Drake has done on Lil Yachty, because if you guys didn't know, in Drake's attempt at connecting more to the youth, he's adopted a lot of Lil Yachty's sound and style into his music and his fashion choices. Obviously we know this because Lil Yachty has written songs for Drake and because Kendrick even said that Lil Yachty can't give him any swag. And Drake has gotten a lot of criticism for this, but always seems to defend Lil Yachty as an artist and as a person, and defends his choices of collaborating with Lil Yachty and incorporating his sound into his own music. But when the tables turned and things were looking down for Drake, Yachty didn't seem to come to his defense. So the fan page was basically calling him out for that, and Lil Yachty responded by saying, "You're making things what they're not. Everybody and their mama know what side I'm on. You fans be overdoing stuff. I didn't go into any specifics of the songs. Stop trying to spin a narrative." Even though he did go into specifics by calling Meet the Grams a good track and saying that Not Like Us was a banger. The fan page responded by saying, "Man, get the F out my face with this BS. I simply reposted your own words. You said you don't think Drake won or lost. You have respect for the guy who called him a certified PDF file and said that the song is banging. What kind of friend are you? You stayed silent watching your friend's character get attacked. You actually made it worse with that interview. Pick a side or shut up." Lil Yachty responded by saying, "It wasn't my beef to speak on. What do you want me to do? Jump on a feature? I said I felt like nobody won. The whole thing was stupid to begin with. When I support him, I'm deriding. When I don't say anything, I switched up. The internet stuff is so lame. You can't win." It's funny to note that this same account that Lil Yachty started beefing with on Twitter also tweeted out something basically calling out Kendrick for being absent in the parenting of his son, because that's an angle that Kendrick used, saying that Drake is absent in his own son's life. And this fan account basically said, "So who was raising your child while you were out cheating on your wife with white women?" This was an attack on Kendrick, and Lil Yachty actually liked the tweet, but just a couple days later, he said that he only liked it by accident, emphasizing again that he wasn't taking any side within this beef. It's also important to note that before Drake and Lil Yachty became best friends, Lil Yachty actually said that Kendrick Lamar, in his opinion, was the best rapper of all time. He's also done interviews with Schoolboy Q, showing that he has ties with Kendrick's record label and has had deep respect for Kendrick's artistry in the past. But because he's publicly been Drake's best friend over the last few years, and Drake rushed to his defense with the Bobbi Althoff stuff, it seemed like it was only natural that Lil Yachty should be defending Drake within this whole beef, since everyone else turned on him. And it seemed like Lil Yachty agreed with this because a couple months later, he hopped on an interview with Andrew Schultz, and he said his biggest regret of the beef is that he actually commented on it, showing that either he feels bad that he said anything negative about Drake, or potentially Drake privately told him that he didn't appreciate Yachty's comments. And there's a couple very interesting things within this interview that made it hard to decipher how Lil Yachty truly felt about this whole situation. Firstly, he seemed to give very politically correct answers anytime Drake or the beef was mentioned. He didn't say anything bad about Drake, but he also didn't go into great length about how much he loves Drake or how great Drake is like he used to do. And he seemed to keep his answers brief in an attempt to move on and switch topics. Also, his tone seemed a little just different talking about Drake than he was when he was talking about random topics like women or bears. We're not going to base anything based off that, but just something to take note of, that he seemed very enthusiastic talking about regular stuff, but he showed no confidence talking about the beef with Kendrick or really anything Drake related. He seemed to try to brush off all those topics. He also said he stopped bringing up the beef to Drake because he was telling Drake a lot of negative stuff other people were saying about him, and he realized Drake was very removed from it and didn't really want to focus on it. Yachty also, funny enough, said that he's been pushing Drake to get back into acting and said that he would play a great mob boss. In my opinion, he's been playing a great mob boss in his music ever since he released Mob Ties. And the most interesting part of this whole thing is that Yachty said that him and Drake actually did a podcast together, but because of the whole quote-unquote Great War, it never came out. But let's really think about it, right? See, ever since this whole quote-unquote Great War has ended, Drake has done nothing calculated or careful with any of his moves to try to make a comeback. He's done about 10 songs since this beef ended, and aside from dropping tons of songs, he's also dropped hours and hours of random footage of him in the studio, him on tour, even footage of him and Lil Yachty together. So if they have this podcast together, what would be stopping Drake from releasing it if he's already released hours and hours of footage and tons of songs since the whole beef ended? I don't think it's exactly a valid reason to not drop this interview just because this beef happened, since Drake has already been dropping random songs and random footage for months now. If nothing has stopped him from dropping literally 100 gigabytes worth of footage, random Instagram account, what would be stopping him from dropping this interview with Lil Yachty? It was before the beef ever happened. It's not like Drake was commenting on anything beef related in that interview. And if he's already dropping new footage constantly, why would it not be the right time to drop a random interview with Lil Yachty, especially when Lil Yachty said that it was a great interview? If anything, that would help him, not hurt him. But it's possible that maybe he feels like he needs to comment on the beef in his next official interview. Regardless, I just think it's very weird that he had no problem popping out with Yachty beforehand, but ever since Kendrick called him out for trying to steal Yachty's swag, he now doesn't want to release any podcasts that he has with him and hasn't really been standing next to him since Yachty made these comments and the whole beef transpired. Around that same time, Lil Yachty also sent Kai Cenat an unreleased record with him and Drake. It's called Super Soak. It was actually a good record. Apparently, it couldn't be officially released because they couldn't clear the sample, but the guy who actually owned the sample said he had no problem releasing the record as long as they took out the cuss words in the record. So it seemed weird that they were creating this whole narrative that the song couldn't be released, and that's why Yachty was leaking it, even though the guy who owned the sample rights said that he had no problem with it coming out. But out of the 10 tracks that Drake has already released since his attempted comeback from this massive loss that he took, that song with Lil Yachty did seem to garner the best response from fans and critics. And Drake has seemed to adopt this weird, unconfident strategy where he's been kind of testing out music, leaking it unofficially, and then only releasing it officially once he sees there's a positive response to it. So given the positive response that this song got, it only made sense that he maybe would now decide to officially release it. And that might be what he's about to do, which we'll touch on in just a moment, but it's also important to note that within the same time period, Lil Yachty also did an interview with Joe Budden. Joe Budden is someone who's been very, very critical of Drake for years. They had a very public feud back in 2016. They also had a little back and forth after Drake released his most recent album, For All the Dogs. After the beef happened, Joe Budden publicly said that he felt like he was responsible for passing the baton to Kendrick to destroy Drake. So it's very strange that Lil Yachty's hesitant to release his interview with Drake, but he's okay with going on and doing an interview with Joe Budden, someone who Drake has had very public issues with. And coincidentally, they didn't bring up Drake once throughout the entire interview, except for at one point where Joe Budden was about to talk about Drake's dominance in the streaming era. And before he brought up Drake's name, he told Yachty, "I'm not going to bring this guy up and we're going to leave this subject right after this, but Drake," and then he proceeded to say whatever he said. It's just strange that he would bring up Drake in this light and obviously show that both him and Yachty were hesitant of mentioning Drake's name, but it's also strange in general that Lil Yachty did this interview with Joe Budden in the first place. But now, like I was saying before, Drake obviously heard the positive response that his Super Soak record with Lil Yachty got, and so he's deciding to officially release it now with a music video. Academics reported that the music video has been shot, he's going to release it soon, but it actually won't feature Lil Yachty anymore. This is also pretty confusing given the fact that it was initially Lil Yachty's record. He was the one who previewed it. He said that the sample couldn't get cleared so they couldn't release it, and that Drake had nothing to do with him leaking it to Kai Cenat. So why would Drake now remove Lil Yachty from the song and just release it on his own? Along with doing an interview with Joe Budden, Lil Yachty also did a second interview with Bobbi Althoff and said that he has a lot of love for her, and never gave us a conclusion on what ended up happening between him and her, or her and Drake. He just basically said that she made some comments that he didn't like after their first interview, but she ended up apologizing, so now he's back to loving her. And now these could all just be speculations, right? Obviously, him commenting on the beef, but not necessarily declaring a winner, doesn't necessarily mean that he's siding with Kendrick. It just means that he's not going to rush to Drake's defense like he used to do. But then he also went on to mention that he regretted commenting on the beef in general. He also started beefing with Drake fan accounts. He leaked one of Drake's records. Then Drake took the record, removed Lil Yachty off it. Now he's planning to release it on his own. And Yachty ends up doing interviews with two people who in the past have not gotten along with Drake, which would be Joe Budden and Bobbi Althoff. Again, all these things could just be weird coincidences, but what wasn't a coincidence was the fact that on August 20th, Lil Yachty ended up unfollowing Drake on Instagram, but then refollowed him right after fans noticed. Now, why I asked you guys at the beginning of this video what Lil Yachty, Lil Wayne, and Travis Scott all have in common is that they're all former collaborators of Drake, and they all might now have potential issues with Drake. Before Kendrick Lamar released his verse on Like That with Future and Metro Boomin, Travis actually performed with Future and Metro Boomin at Rolling Loud and told them to play that record specifically. And on Drake's first diss track, Push-Ups, many fans speculated that he was actually dissing Travis Scott in there with a line about baby mothers. He also had a massive Travis Scott head as a prop at one of his concerts, and he was seen shooting at it with his microphone. With Lil Wayne, I just did a whole video breaking down why they might have issues. You could go check that out. It's the video that's been released right before this one. But again, it is important to note that at this point in time, all of this is speculation. We have no idea if these former friends of Drake have now turned on him, and we have no idea how this will play out in the long term. But of all the people to be potentially beefing with Drake, Lil Yachty's definitely the most surprising, as Drake has rushed to his defense multiple times in the past. Lil Yachty has gassed Drake up and glazed him for the last few years. They've collaborated several times. Drake has gotten a lot of hate for incorporating Yachty's sound and style into his own music, but he's always defended his decision to do so. So it's very strange to see Lil Yachty comment on the beef the way he did. It's strange to see him unfollow Drake on Instagram, link up with a couple of Drake's ops. It's weird to see Drake take Lil Yachty off a record that Lil Yachty already leaked online, and it's weird that we haven't seen the two together since they were together so often before this whole beef, and Drake has been making very desperate attempts to link up with anyone who still gets along with him within the industry to show that not everyone hates him. But maybe Lil Yachty does, maybe he doesn't. We won't know until we know. For now, this is all we know, so let me know in the comments what you guys want to see next. If you think Drake and Lil Yachty are truly beefing, what comes next for Drake within this point of his career? Is he going to be able to make a comeback with so many enemies within the industry? And how does this play out for hip-hop as a whole? Me personally, I don't really want to see Drake collaborating with Lil Yachty in the future. I'd rather see him go team up with someone like Lil Wayne, where he can actually attempt to get back at his roots and try to make something a little more lyrically ambitious. But it might be a long climb back up to the top, and he might never regain that love that he once had from his fans within hip-hop. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.